We're gonna be reacting to Matthew Santoro's video called 10 Freakiest Creepypastas Ever Told Part 5. Let's react to it.
Uncle Matt's here to tell you a bedtime story.
Let's make it like long ways.
Creepypasta stories lurk in the lines between fiction and our darkest realities. These digital nightmares have become modern folklore, and they're always ready to send shivers down your spine. From eerie urban legends to paranormal encounters that defy explanation, they're expertly crafted to haunt your dreams. The following is part 5 of some of the most petrifying creepypastas ever shared online, and there's no telling what psychological impact these horrific tales might have on you. So prepare yourself for a journey into the darkest recesses of the internet, where the only thing more unsettling than these stories is the fact that they could very well be true. And before we begin, please leave a like on this video. The more likes and comments we get, the farther the video reaches in the algorithm. Thank you, of course, for your support. And be sure to support the original writers of these stories on the Creepypasta
Now that
website.
would be scary if my teeth fell. The Watcher. Oh, hell no. How long is this video? 16 minutes? Okay.
The Watcher tells the story of Sarah, a nurse who woke up before sunrise each morning. Like every morning, Sarah went to the kitchen to boil some water. When she looked out the window, the large oak tree in her backyard had the silhouette of a dark figure in its branches. She considered...
I'm sorry, you guys could barely see me. I'm gonna make this in, like, hold on. Like that. Okay.
calling the police, but since the figure had disappeared, she thought her tired eyes were just playing tricks on her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being a tree in her backyard. The Watcher tells the story of Sarah, a nurse who woke up before sunrise each morning. Like every morning, Sarah went to the kitchen to boil some water. When she looked out the window, the large oak tree in her backyard had the silhouette of a dark figure in its branches. She considered calling the police, but since the figure had disappeared, she thought her tired eyes were just playing tricks on her. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. After a long, hard day at work, she returned home after having almost entirely forgotten about the encounter. When she went inside, her heart sank as she saw muddy footprints leading from the back door into the house. When she grabbed her phone to call the police, a text came in. It was an unknown number sending her a picture of her from behind as she peered out the window that very morning. She completely panicked when she realized that the picture was taken from inside the house. She frantically scanned her surroundings and froze as she saw a pair of eyes staring at her from the darkness of her hallway. The lights flickered, then went out, and in complete darkness, she heard footsteps slowly approaching her. Suddenly, a cold hand clamped over her mouth, and a voice whispered, "I've been watching you." Sarah was never heard from again.
They got
when the police arrived the next morning, they found nothing but muddy footprints and a single chilling note on the kitchen counter.
Click.
She was delicious.
How was she now? That's disgusting. The slaughterhouse.
As seasoned pig farmer James Jimmy O'Neill rounded up his pigs for slaughter, he handed a young apprentice a knife and tasked him with killing his first pig. The boy was extremely nervous. Noticing his hesitation, the already blood-soaked farmer yelled, "Boy, you're entirely too old to be pussyfooting with a grown hog like that. If you intend to do a job, then do it. Don't hesitate." The boy looked down at the fear-stricken pig with pity. Again, the boy hesitated, so the frustrated farmer rushed in with a quick slash. The job was done. All the boy could do was watch the thick, hot blood flow towards the drain and stare into the lifeless eyes that seemed to accuse him of betrayal. It was at that moment that he realized he'd never be able to do it. He was no killer, especially since he spent an entire year tending to that very pig, talking to it as if it were an old friend. Perhaps the closest thing he had
Charlotte's
to
Web.
As the guilt grew and grew, the room became unbearably hot and the walls closed in. His breathing grew heavy, the lights grew dim, and he collapsed onto the blood-stained floor. When he came to, he looked up to the old farmer standing over him with a knife. The farmer turned to a smaller figure and yelled, "Boy, you're entirely too old to be pussyfooting with a grown hog like that. If you intend to do a job, then do it. Don't hesitate." The farmer bent down towards him and ran the knife across his neck. His blood flowed towards the drain, and as he faded into the darkness, he looked up to see his mournful self looking down at him.
It was him from the future. Hi, me. Hi, me
A
from
man
the
and his
future.
young daughter used to live in a small apartment.
Hi.
He decided to move because of the bad neighborhood,
Do you guys like
but mainly
that?
because of a guy in the apartment right above theirs. He was a weird-looking man who mostly kept to himself,
You
but
a
around midnight
weird-looking
every
man.
night he made these strange...
Yeah, you a weird looking man. Yeah, you look kinda weird. I don't like you. You a weird looking man and I like you. That's my new song.
noises. They weren't loud, but he was a really light sleeper, so it was hard for him to
Was he
sleep
now?
with those little bumping sounds going on
Was
and
he
on.
now?
It reminded him of high heels walking around, but not as loud, as if
Click,
the person
clack,
was walking
click, clack.
lightly, trying to be more quiet for the man and his
Baby
daughter.
monster,
After a few days, the
I
man
got
realized
no
that the
rhythm
pattern
on
was
my
always
mind.
the same,
I'm sorry, I'll
like a
shut up.
recording played over and over with random intervals in between.
Oh, that's
That
weird.
went on for the better part of a year, almost always the same sequence of bumps, slowly driven into the man's mind, sometimes for hours during the night. Several years later, in their
Why is
current home,
everything
the man was helping
splattered
his
with
daughter with some
rainbow?
homework. She was learning alternate methods of communication
not
like
scary.
Morse code. And when she knocked on the table with her knuckles, a shiver immediately ran down the man's spine. It was the exact same pattern. Immediately, he asked her what it meant, and she laughed. "It's the easiest one, Daddy. It's the one to call for help."
What? Gateway of Mine. I think I heard this before.
In 1983, a team of deeply religious scientists believed that a person without any senses could be able to perceive the presence of God. An elderly man who
Could
had
they?
nothing left to live for volunteered,
Huh.
so they performed a complex operation to sever his sensory nerves. He retained full muscular function, but he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. Now he
Damn.
was alone with his thoughts.
How'd y'all do that
He
to that
mumbled
old man?
slurred sentences, but soon
That's
he
effed
began
up.
naming the deceased relatives of the scientists. He
Oh,
had
no.
personal information that only their relatives would have known. Soon he became
No.
bombarded by hundreds of ghostly voices that refused to leave him alone. He begged the scientists for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping, but that just caused severe night terrors. He began screaming, clawing at his non-functional eyes, and begging to be killed. But the scientists were convinced that he was
Let that
close to
man
contacting
go.
God. When he
No.
started biting off chunks of his own flesh, they restrained him. After a
no.
few hours of being tied down, the subject
That's sad.
halted his struggling and screaming. He
I feel like it is kind of scary that he knows the victim's relatives like that. But I feel like that's more sad than scary. Like, could you imagine if that happened to you? I would be clawing at my own flesh too. That's sad. I
stared
feel
blankly at the
sympathy for that
ceiling as
man.
teardrops streamed
It's not
from
real,
his
but,
face.
you know, I still
For
feel
2 weeks,
sympathy
he was
for that
manually
man.
rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head, and despite his blindness, made contact with a scientist and whispered,
Oh.
"I've spoken with God. He has abandoned us." His vital signs stopped,
Really?
and they couldn't find a formal cause
Why
of
though?
death.
Did he see? Okay, why did he abandon us? There's no reason at all. Okay, he abandoned us because he listened to Ice JJ Fish. He listened to some type of song. I don't know. We need an explanation why.
To celebrate his parents' 20th wedding anniversary, a young man was getting ready to meet
saw
them
that
and his
TikTok
sister
trend
at the
got too
family's
far.
favorite Italian restaurant. He was getting dressed in his best
Ooh,
suit when
anime.
at exactly 5:33 p.m., he received a startling text message from his mother. He was confused at first since the text was just a jumbled mess of random letters and numbers. But his confusion turned to worry when he read in that weird jargon the legible phrase, "Please help me." Getting a chill, he immediately replied, "Are you okay?" and instantly got her reply, "Oops, pocket text." At that moment, he breathed a
Pocket
huge
text,
sigh
my
of relief.
ass.
Moments later, he received the same text from his father. In the mess of letters and numbers, he could make out the phrase, "Please help me."
You better go
And
save
before
your
he could
parents.
respond, his father sent "Oops, pocket text." Now,
Pocket
his
text
father was
my
a
ass.
joker, so he thought that this was his
Joker,
way of
yeah,
poking
okay.
fun at his mother's mistake. But when he
don't
got
say
the
Joker
exact
because-
same message from his
Don't say Joker because that shit reminds me of the Smiling Man. If that shit traumatized me as a kid, I'll show you a photo right here. That shit is childhood trauma. F that.
sister,
F
he
that.
felt pure, unmistakable panic.
No, ma'am.
This couldn't be a coincidence. In a state of shock, he began running to the restaurant, but was stopped by a police officer. The officer told him that the road was closed because of
Officer's
a
the
huge car
killer.
crash. The young man saw the wreckage of his parents' car and was horrified to see his mother, father, and sister laying lifeless on the road. It was later reported that they had all died instantly at exactly 5:32 p.m., exactly 1 minute before the texts.
How are you supposed to help them, though?
One day, instead of begging for change, a homeless man in Queens began selling paintings. He went to a recycling center for old paint cans and painted on any material he could find. Surprisingly, the man was really good, and the locals were happy to support his new venture. They loved his landscape work, but for some reason, everyone hated his portraits of them. They'd look at their own painted face in disgust, and soon, no one asked for portraits again. One man became extremely confused. He told his neighbor that hers was beautiful.
They do that. Like, even if you go to a fair, they make your face, like, super fat. They, like, exaggerate your facial features. They make you have, like, a big-ass nose. They make your eyes, like, that big.
Lifelike. But the woman slapped him and ran off, frightened. Nevertheless, he was so impressed that he asked the painter for one of his own. He paid the man $2 and was told to come back the next day. When he returned, the man was gone, but the portrait was there with a note that read, "Good luck." He uncovered the painting and was horrified. He looked twisted, warped, and was clearly dying, if not already dead. Bugs and crows fed on him, and it made him physically ill. A neighbor behind him said, "Hey, that looks amazing and so lifelike. I ought to get one done too." And when the man turned around, the neighbor looked twisted, warped, and clearly dying with bugs and crows feeding him. He looked around. Everyone and everything looked the way he did in the painting.
You know Gumball? Banana Joe's mom? She could do that too.
Everything was horrible and ugly, and it made him ill. And when anyone told him how beautiful his portrait was, no matter what he did, he couldn't convince them to not get one of their own.
Mason. Or Mason. Mason. It's not Mason. What are you, American? It's Mason. It's French. It's French. It's Mason. By Jenny Crow.
After a teenage girl was hit by a drunk driver, she comes out of her coma in a shared hospital room with a boy named Mason. The doctors told her that she had about a 60% chance of ever walking again. Her family comforted her on their visits, but Mason started becoming her main emotional support. On many lonely nights, they'd snuggle up in bed together, and the nurses remarked that they could be an old married couple and how they'd known each other forever. Mason had Hodgkin's lymphoma and was given a 60% chance of surviving. The girl thought that their connection would help both of them recover, but as she was getting better, Mason was getting worse. The chemo made his brows curl thin to almost nothing, and his skin turned pale. When her legs grew strong enough to be released, she visited him every day. One night, Mason's heart stopped, and the girl completely broke down. When he came to, she told him to never leave her alone like that again. She didn't want to leave him and hated seeing his frail body hooked up to those machines, so they stowed away to her parents' cabin. She was happier than ever. She didn't care that she was on the night.
I'm happier than ever when I'm away from you. I'm happier than ever. Okay, sorry.
Nightly news. They were together. She didn't care that the police were looking for her. They were together. She didn't care that his flesh crawled with maggots and peeled off his bones, or if the smell of his rot never faded from her skin. His lips were still warm at night, and his once strong arms could hold her. As long as they were together, everything would be okay. Having grown up poor in the deep south, two brothers had to share a bed for years. When the older brother turned 10, he was overjoyed when he was given his own bed. Finally, his little 6-year-old brother Ollie wouldn't...
All types of creepy shit happens up in the south. I'm sorry. They got the goat man. They got everything down there. They got creepy stuff.
Annoy him with his tossing and turning. Or for that matter, need to be held when he got scared of every little thing. But only days after the boy got his new bed, the shrieks started. At first, he thought Ollie screamed because he'd gotten scared. But the sound echoed through the tiny room again, and he knew it was not a normal cry. And since the room was pitch black at night, the boy couldn't see a thing. Every night at roughly the same time, the sharp yelps would wake him up. He knew it wasn't his mom or dad, and he definitely knew it wasn't Ollie, because Ollie was hugging him tightly. The boy had finally gotten his own bed, but the shrieks scared Ollie enough to crawl into his bed every
It's grandma.
night,
She's
shaking
using
in
the
fear.
bathroom.
Those
She has
sleepless nights
constipation.
got so bad that the boy almost went insane. His parents didn't believe him since the shrieks never happened when they were in his room. His grades were dropping and he was miserable, so they decided to move. The new house was perfect. The noise hadn't followed him there, and better yet, there was even a bunk bed for the boys.
Oh, no.
Ollie wanted the top bunk, but the older boy argued that he deserved it. After all, Ollie had ruined every night of sleep for years climbing into bed with him. But Ollie just looked at him puzzled, saying, "I never once did that."
Oh, wait, what? Wait, say that again?
Every night of sleep for years climbing into... The noise hadn't followed him there, and better yet, there was even a bunk bed for the boys. Ollie wanted the top bunk, but the older boy argued that he deserved it. After all, Ollie had ruined every night of sleep for years climbing into bed with him. But Ollie just looked at him puzzled, saying, "I never once did that."
Oh, It started as a leak. Unknown author. Okay.
In a
What, you went to
particularly
go
rainy
pee?
season, a man's ceiling began leaking into his apartment's dining room.
Yeah.
He shrugged it off and put a
That
pot under
happens.
it, expecting the leak to stop soon. But it kept raining and the pot soon overflowed. He had to dump the water out the first thing in the morning and again when he got
There is some space left in the toilet, but I don't want it to overflow. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm stupid.
home from work. Eventually, the leak began damaging the white plaster ceiling, turning it into a dull shade of brown. He checked the weather and realized that it would continue to rain for the next 10 days.
Like that.
The man was worried about the ceiling mildewing and called his landlord. He left a few voicemails, but the landlord would not return his calls. Usually he was easy to reach, but he thought, well, it's the landlord's property, so it's his problem to fix. One night, the man was startled awake by a massive crash. The ceiling collapsed and a mangled human figure was laying on his table. He sprinted out of his apartment and called the police, gagging at the smell. While the police performed an autopsy, the man finally reached his landlord. The landlord was just as panicked and alarmed as he was, and the man pleaded for him to join him at the station. When a detective approached, he lowered his phone and his blood ran cold. The remains belonged to Richard Thompson, his landlord, and he had died over a year ago. He wondered if his landlord was dead, then who was on the phone with him right now?
His spirit. After Death by Johnny Crow again. Johnny Crow.
This story is one person's account of the afterlife,
Probably the last
and it
song.
begins just as their mortal pain ends. Their soul looked down at their human form lying under a mangled metallic roadside wreck, and a voice asked, "So, had a nice life?" She introduces herself as Cindy, but is very vague about where they are. Was this heaven, or was this hell, or perhaps some form of limbo? Cindy just giggled and led the way through the strange new world. She asked the new soul if they had been good while they were alive, and that it was a hard question to answer. Cindy warned, "Well, for your sake, you better have been good." Suddenly, they heard a loud commotion, and Cindy excitedly shouted, "Come on, this way." They reached the front of the hospital where hundreds of people were savagely ripping each other apart. Someone is giving birth here. These souls are fighting to get inside of that newborn shell. There's no baby until a soul penetrates it, and if no soul makes it inside, the doctors pronounce the shell dead. Your fighting strength depends on your karma, so bad souls don't stand a chance. They will never get a shell and will painfully wither away. Children are the most dangerous because they're pure and innocent, so stay away from them during fights. Completely shocked, the new soul once again asked if this was limbo. Cindy replied, "This is hell. The life you left behind is heaven, and you'll have to fight tooth and nail to get back there." But thank you for watching this video, and please remember to leave a like, a comment, and share this video if you really enjoyed it. And be sure to visit the Creepypasta website to support the writers of these stories. And of course, if you want to watch more, there's some clickable links on screen, and be sure to add me to all my socials. Links are in the description. I'll see you next time.
The University of Tulsa is home to the most National Merit Scholars per capita in the nation. Want to know why?
When it comes to medical school, we get in at twice the national average.
Okay, well, that was the story, wasn't it? So I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction. Thank you for watching, and bye guys. The scariest one was the last one because WTF was that. That's actually really disturbing, and it could actually be true because you never know what will happen to you when you go. So yeah, bye guys. Thank you for watching. More K-pop. more K-pop, more videos. Hey, you better stay tuned for me now. Okay, bye guys. Cut to the outro.